while we wait for everyone to join, we can start getting through some of the practicalities with today's webinar. So first of all, thank you very much for joining this webinar organized by the NIDA Fellowship Center with the support of DHI. For the next 1.5 hours, we will be talking about, a few experts talking about decision support system for integrated water resources management. And my name is Nicola Balbarini. I'm from DHI, and I will be your host today for the next 1.5 hours. We have a very exciting program for today, but before we get started on the program, just a few practical, points so that everything works smoothly. First of all, as I already mentioned, the webinar will last about 1.5 hours from now. And we expect it to be an engaging webinar, so there will be a good time, will be quite a lot of time at the end dedicated for question and answer session. So we'll have first a few presentations, and then there will be the time for the Q&A. And in order, of course, to run smoothly, I will ask you to post your questions to the panelists. You can do it at any time during the presentation, after the presentation, but I'll kindly ask you to use the Q&A field. You will see it on the, if you're not familiar with Zoom, there is in the bar, one of the buttons is called Q&A, and you can just click there and post your questions so that we can keep track of all the questions and ask them at the end, post them at the end to the presenters for which they are dedicated to. And of course, in order to make this as smooth as possible, I will ask you to, of course, also write who the question is for, if it is for all panelists or if it is for one of the presenters. Another important point is that the webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to access the recording afterward. But of course, this also means that you are fine with the fact that we are recording this. Finally, the last point is that we will also make all slides and recording available after the webinar, so you will be able to receive all the slides and the recording in case there is anything you would like to follow up on. Said this, we are ready to move into our exciting agenda for today. The first point in the agenda is a welcoming remark, an opening remark from Arvid Slot from the NIDA Fellowship Center. So I'll ask now Arvid to turn on his video, turn on his microphone, and take over for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. I'm Arvid Slot from the NIDA Fellowship Center, and I'm pleased to warmly welcome you all to this webinar. It is an exciting topic, decision support systems in water resource management. At the NIDA Fellowship Center, we have over the years facilitated many fellowship center or many fellowships to courses, learning programs, and research activities related to water management. And we will also continue to do so in the future. But therefore, many participants in DFC learning programs have now become members of the NIDA Fellows Network. A very warm welcome to you all. Today, we also have the honor of having the presence of researchers and professional water management experts. Also a special warm welcome to you. And we are indeed happy to see so many taking this webinar opportunity. And it will be interesting to evaluate afterwards whether there is a wider interest for more of such highly technical webinars. And I can see now that there are already many attending. We are well above 50 at this point. And in this series of water events, we will also arrange a live stream of a water debate that will be held on DFC on October the 5th, and yet another webinar on flood warning systems on November 15. You will, of course, also be invited for these events too. We aim for that this webinar on decision support system will give you useful insights into the field of making decisions in water management context where many complex challenges are in place. Yeah, I'm also very delighted to welcome and present our three presenters from DSI. Firstly, Dr. Nicola Balbarini, who is a water resource expert and has been engaged in several projects leading to the development of digital support decision systems. Nicola will give us a short overall technical fly into the subject, and moreover, he has accepted to take on the moderating and not least the timekeeping role for this webinar. Next, Jan Kwiatkowski is the Vice President for Water Authorities and will take us deeper into the concepts and into the engine room of decision support tools. He has advised key national water institutions, worked in major international water-oriented organizations, and served water operators in a number of major cities. Finally, Dr. Nicola Balbarini is a water resource specialist and has for more than 30 years worked with decision support systems in African and European countries. And he will take us through concrete and country-based examples of working with digital decision support systems. I look very much forward to this. This will be so exciting. So back to you, Nicola, to take it further. Thank you. And welcome to everybody again.
Thank you very much, Arvid, for your remarks and for guiding us through the super exciting agenda that we have for today. So getting started on the agenda, as Arvid mentioned, I will be the first speaker, and my role here is I will give you an introduction or mention a few of the main principles of integrated water resources management and introduce also a little bit why decision support systems are so useful when dealing with integrated water resources management. A few words about myself to add already on what Arvid has introduced. As he mentioned, I work at DHI. For those of you who are not familiar what DHI is a not-for-profit organization. It's an organization that started as a Danish Hydrological Institute, so it's based in Denmark, but has offices in more than 40 countries around the world, and a bit more than 1,100 employees across the world. I myself sit in the International Development Department at DHI. Here I'm a water resources management expert, and I work mainly in countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Southern America, dealing with the challenges of integrated water resources management. Yes. Why, first of all, is important to talk about water resources management. Why is it critical? And I know many of you are expert in the topic, or maybe expert in water resources. So I'm sure you are familiar of many of the challenges related to water resources in your own country, in your own region where you're operating. But what I would like to do here is, rather than going in details with all the many challenges, I would just like to give a kind of an overview about what are the major topics, what are the major challenges in water resources, and why water resources management is important, is even more important now than it has been in the past. So if we look at some of the challenging, first of all, we have from one side a pressure from human development. So we have a population that is growing, economic growth in many places around the world. And these two aspects combined are, of course, leading to an increased demand of water resources, of water use, but at the same time are also posing a threat in terms of pollution. So we see an increase in pollution in water environments. If from one side we see a lot of these anthropogenic challenges, on the other hand, the water cycle is not changing that much. So the amount of water that there is in the system that is available is more or less the same. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar also with the fact that here comes into play some changes in the environment, like for example linked to climate change, which has been on the mind of many in the past decades maybe, and here we see not so much a change in how much water is available, but rather how this water is being distributed across regions, across countries, and over time. So of course there is an element of change here, also important to keep in mind. But when dealing with the fact that the total amount of water doesn't change, but we need more water as humans, and more of it is polluted, of course this creates a competition over water resources, especially in those places where water is scarce. And there is the need of having an integrated approach for dealing with water resources management in order to really allocate water in the best way where it's needed and in order to avoid conflict. And as I mentioned, is a very broad overview to what I'm doing on the water resources challenge. But I think this is kind of a good starting point. And one of the things more I would like to highlight it in this overview is the word integrated. So I'm sure many of us are familiar with water resources management, but it is important also to look at it in an integrated way. And what do I mean with the word integrated? We see integrated as being kind of spilling over two different topics. So integrated in terms of the natural elements. So looking at the natural elements in the way they are playing together. So not looking at silos, just looking at surface water or groundwater, but looking at the water cycle altogether. So linking up surface water aspect, groundwater aspects. The quantity and the quality of water is also important to look at it in an integrated way, in a linked way, and of course both looking at issues downstream and upstream of, for example, river basins, because we know all these issues are linkage. But with the word integrated, I also refer to, or we usually also refer to integrated in terms of the political elements. So really emphasize and ensure coordination at different political level, at different organizations that are maybe responsible for different aspects, socioeconomic aspects, energy production, food production, that are at the end all linked with water resources. And in order to ensure this integrated approach of the water resources, one of the key really resources that is available is the workflow, is the system, is the system that the United Nations Environmental Program, or UNEP, has set up around monitoring, assessing the degree of integrated water resources management implementation across countries, across all countries in the world. And this is being reported through the SDG indicator 6.5.1. Now, I don't want to go through in detail on how the indicator is and what are the aspects of these indicators, but what I would like to highlight is that all the work that is done around the UNEP has been driving around this indicator provides a lot of very useful information, resources, in some cases also funding, in order to really achieve integrated water resources management. And the way, and UNEP every few years really tries to track and monitor the status of integrated water resources management, the way this is dealt at the national level in all countries, and does this through this reporting system, which is outlined in the slide for the SDG 6.5.1. And what I would like also to emphasize is that I think it's quite interesting in the way this reporting mechanism has been set up by UNEP. They are looking at different aspects, which are all very important and critical when dealing with integrated water resources management. And you can see them outlined here. So they have identified kind of like 3 major areas for really successfully achieving integrated water resources. And these 4 elements are having the enabling environment in the country that allows, so having the right laws, policies, plans that allows to have integrated water resources management, having the stakeholder engagement, so the institutional participation that is needed in order for this integrated approach, management instruments, so being able to monitor progress, and finally also the funding that are required in order to set up all the different implement and sustain all the different activities, for IWRM. And I think this is really useful because it provides a very good overview about the complexity of the problem and also all the different elements that are needed. And one thing I would like to emphasize here, so I will not focus a lot on decision support system, will be the next speaker who will do that, but just as a little bit of a kind of like a little introductory to that, the decision support system is a very important resource, a very important tool in order to achieve IWRM, because as you can see, it really plays many of the aspects that are outlined by UNEP as necessary for IWRM. It allows to create plans and about how to use resources. It supports stakeholder engagement, capacity development. It can be a great way of like monitoring and keeping track of progress. And of course, also in this way, sustain the financing effort required to achieve IWRM. Just a few maybe important highlights from the work that UNEP has been doing. And I must also mention here that UNEP DHI is one of the centers, one of the organizations that support UNEP in this in these activities around IWRM. I'll be a bit more in detail about our role, but what I would like to emphasize is that from the recent monitorings, the latest one in 2017 and 2020, the latest one is soon to be published. What is quite clear is that there has been an improvement in the way of looking at integrated water resources management, but the coverage of the application of IWRM at the national, at the global level is still a medium level. So there's a lot of improvement. There is a lot of many ways where we can improve, even though many steps has already been taken in the past years. And I think just to go a bit more in detail in this analysis, there has been an improvement in the past years. We're talking about 5% towards to achieving the kind of like optimal status where we would like to be with IWRM implementation. But there is still a lot to be done. And what is even more important, there is the way in which we are proceeding has to speed up a lot in order to get to the targets that have been set up for 2030. And the graph on the left side at the bottom of the slide outlines, looking at all the different elements, where are we and how far we are. And as you can see, there is very much space for improvement in all different elements, financing standing out a bit more than others. And I'll say a few words also around this, how we can get there. So in order to looking, I know many of you are maybe dealing with integrated water resource management, maybe interested into it. So which kind of tools are available? Which kind of resources are out there that can already be used? As I mentioned before, UNEP and DHI through the UNEP DHI Center is actively engaged in this area, is providing quite a lot of really opportunities that are out there and freely available. And I think I would like to highlight this because I believe there are many of the resources of the information out there that can be used by many of you in order to really achieve the goals that are set at in different regions, in different countries. And two major kind of like group of resources I would like to highlight. The first one is around data. So there is an IWRM data portal, which is hosted by UNEP and UNEP DHI. And this is the portal where you can get access to a lot of the data that are being reported by countries, a lot of the global and regional reports and status. And again, this is a good like kind of data set that is freely available and that can be used in order to really understand the status in the different regions, the different countries of IWRM, and what are and use this to inform the best actions in order to move forward. The other group of the other set of like kind of like resources that are available is SDG 6 IWRM support program. And I think this is quite an interesting area because this is really a program that is supported by UNEP, where where the resources are available in order to accelerate really the implementation of integrated water resources management. And this can go in many different ways. So just to give you, don't want to spend too much time with it, but I think I just I just want to give you like a very simple overview around what is out there, what is possible. And then you're very much welcome, of course, to reach out to the entities that are working in this support program, if you're interested. So, as I mentioned before, SDG 6 IWRM support program has 3 areas where really UNEP and many of the other organizations like GWP and CapNet and UNDP in this partnership are there to support national organizations. And this goes from, identifying the challenges. This is very much like a root cause analysis. What are the challenges? What are the problems? There is also a second stage, a second group of activities that is around supporting the development of action plans. So kind of trying to make resources available to understand from the problem to what could be this, what the solution look like, what are the actions that are needed. And then the third stage is implementation of solutions. And the support given by this support program is in different ways, can be funding, can be supporting the different steps, can also be help raising the needed capacity or the needed funds in order to move forward at the regional or at the national level. I will now stop here, and I hope this has given you an overview around integrated water resources management. What are the key aspects of really working water resource management in an integrated way, and what are some of the available tools with special focus on the work that the UNEP and UNEP DHI has been doing in the past years. And I will now stop here and stop my presentation and introduce the next speaker. As Arvid has already introduced, his name is Jan Kwiatkowski, and he's a Vice President Water Resources at DHI, and he will go a bit more in detail around decision support systems and how they can support water resources management. So I'll pause here, over to you.
Thanks, Nicola. If you just could stop sharing, then I could share my screen.
Yes.
Okay. There it goes. So I hope you can all see it. Thanks for inviting me, Nicola, to this event, and thanks to Danida. I'll try to be brief because I think we're running a little bit behind schedule. So first of all, what is a decision support system? At least the way we define it in DHI, it's usually an IT system which collects information regarding the river basin which we're interested in. It collects live data, it collects historical data, and usually it's also connected to a mathematical model which simulates the flows and levels within a river, and also a lot of other parameters which are related to hydrology. And then there is the decision support tools which actually enable the user of the system to access the information which they need for their daily decisions. And as you can see, a river basin is usually pretty complex. There's a lot of things going on. There's structures. There's a lot of the elements, or all the elements of the hydrological cycle that play into it. And if you have a big river, it is extremely complex, and that's why we need some tools to manage the information which we can collect and generate. So I'm going to narrate along this diagram where on the left side I'm showing the different functions of water management authorities or water management activities, and when I'm talking about water management authorities, it's usually the primary user of the decision support system. So it could be a river basin district management unit, for example. And then on the right hand side are the different system components, which the main ones here are highlighted: the database, the models, the visualization, decision support, and websites. And then in the middle you can see the use cases. So these are the use cases which connect the major activities with the system components, and how each of these support each other. I'll try to explain. So let's start from the monitoring. Monitoring is a broad topic, obviously, and oops, sorry, this is not working now. It starts from the historical data. So here you can see one of the decision support systems that DHI has developed, and it's the Myanmar system. And you can see on the bottom in this chart, we have like 23 years of hydrological data, which is collected, and you can see the dots on the and different figures on the map. These are places where this data has been measured. So this is the first big thing, to collect all the historical data in one place. Sounds simple, but it's actually a big step. The next thing is all the observation data which we have accessible, and starting from satellite data. As you can see on this picture here, we can measure evapotranspiration, we can measure a lot of different things. In this Myanmar system, when you click on the data set selection, you have actually 170 different data sets, which are both from Earth observation, but also from other sources like the IPCC climate models and all the different things that we could collect, which are relevant in water management. Then we have all the monitoring stations which are actually transmitting the live data, so near real-time measurements of flows, of pumps, levels, etc. All this is collected again into the DSS as part of the monitoring package. And finally, we have model results. And why do we need models when we have all these measurements already in the system? This picture kind of explains it as one of the examples. And you can see a cross section of a river, and the river has a varying level, and you can see a low level situation and a high level situation. And then depending on this, whether we have high or low level, we have different surface area where we have different exchange of water between the aquifer and the river, and that also impacts evaporation losses and and all kinds of processes which kick into the hydrological pattern, which we cannot measure directly, not on a broad scale. That's why we use models to actually calculate all these parameters, and then based on the historical data, we validate the models, and we can fill in the gaps to have even more knowledge than provided from the measurements and from the satellites, etc. And here's just the example showing that these river losses and gains to groundwater and from groundwater, they are distributed over the area of the models, and they can vary. And this is a picture from the Karm system in Australia, which is on the Murrumbidgee River, and this river is 1,400 miles long, or kilometers, sorry. So you can imagine that when you release water from the upstream reservoirs and you want to satisfy the demands in the downstream for the downstream users, which are large irrigation fields and municipalities, etc. It is a very long travel time of the water. So you have to get it right. You have to understand your hydrology. You have to understand all the impacts if you want to really optimize the way you're operating the river. And then finally, on the monitoring side, all that data can be used to calculate different metrics. And here we have a water resources index. It's an example of a national system which DHI developed from Malaysia. And you can see the different indexes in different timescales, which again support the decision. So that's very much on the monitoring side. You can see that already the power of this system is just by collecting all the data in one place. But then we have planning tools, so we can actually analyze scenarios for the future. And here you have, again, example from Myanmar, where we analyze different hydropower production scenarios. And then, through the decision support system, you can easily compare, even not being an expert, you can compare the different scenarios. You can run multi-criteria analysis to understand what are the trade-offs and the impacts of each scenario. And these results can be then visualized in a simple way And if you look at this, you have 6 different scenarios and 6 different parameters, starting from total hydropower production. It's obvious that this second blue one is, is the most effective in terms of generating hydropower, but it also has the highest habitat impact, right? It has also the highest potential impact on people. So probably meaning relocating around 500,000 people. So this thanks to this DSS approach, we can engage a broad group of stakeholders into understanding the issues, understanding the impacts, the trade-offs, and collectively making decisions. And that's very much within the integrated water resources management philosophy, which Nicola presented. So this is what I've just highlighted, that it's a platform for collaborative decision making, and especially when you have a variety of stakeholders, that's very relevant. And the advantage is that we can actually narrow down these gigabytes of data into a relatively comprehensible system that a lot of people can chip into and actually support their thinking and their opinions and their decision making based on these inputs. Then the obviously investment planning is another part of it. I won't go into that too deeply. And then permitting, that's a big part of integrated water resource management, and that's the practical thing that you need to do when you're managing a water body. And then operations. On operations, I have some more examples. So first of all, you can optimize the river operations, which I already mentioned, by scheduling releases to match the demands, meeting environmental flow requirements, and then taking into account all types of constraints. And yeah, just again, for the Malaysian system, you can see on the over here that there is pumps, water treatment pumps, irrigation pumps, dam operations, target levels for barrages and other structures. All that is integrated into the system, so you can actually optimize the way you proceed, and the same goes for irrigation. Barrage target levels, which you can input through the operators' dialogues and things like that. So that all contributes to a good DSS, and then, as I mentioned, this is going back to this Murrumbidgee River. Different hydrological phenomena require different models and different approaches to modeling. So you can see, for those who are aware of the MIC technology, that we have different types of models: lumped, distributed, hydraulic, hydrological, etc., all put into the system so that we can get the most out of the functionalities. Furthermore, forecasting and warning, I mean, that's a very classical type of decision support. And you can see that in the Malaysian system, we have a short-term forecast, we have a long-term forecast. And the short-term is usually 2 weeks, which gives you a possibility based on the weather forecast to predict with good precision the upcoming events. And then the long-term forecast, which can go to 9 to 12 months ahead, based on climatic models, which tell you, whether you should be prepared for a drought or a flood season, and all the insights which are related to that. And of course, dam operations are part of that long-term planning. So you can use a lot of inputs from there. And an example from a flood forecasting system. This is a system in Poland where we have a local weather radar connected to the hydrological models, and this helps us to actually predict floods, obviously, but also some very practical things like the conditions on the bridges. I mean, it's when a flash flood hits you in the middle of the night, and you are a rescue team, you have to understand which way you can go. And that might sound trivial, but this kind of information was specifically requested by the practical, the people who have to deal in practical terms with these kind of situations. So back to the diagram, we've gone through the operations and very briefly on the reporting. You can imagine that when you have all that data in the system, all the models, all the inputs, it's relatively easy to automate your reporting. And that means huge efficiency gains and a lot of transparency, which is, again, a big part of the integrated water resources management concept. Running more or less to the finalization, I just enrich this diagram with all the connections, so you can see that all the different functionalities connect to the system components through the use cases, and then there's a long list of those. What I haven't mentioned yet is capacity building. Obviously, when you have new people in the system, it's easy to train them when they have access to all these functionalities. Communication, when you need to disseminate information to the public, when you need to educate or run research projects, all that is obviously supported strongly by a system like the one described. And just the final 2 slides, or final 3 slides, key challenges. Unfortunately, resistance to change is one of the key challenges which we encounter when building these systems, and then also the institutional organization, which is not easy to align with the logics of such a system. So sometimes you actually have to make a step back and reorganize your whole management system before you can make the full use of a DSS. The modeling approaches, as I mentioned, they can vary from conceptual models through hydraulic models to distributed hydrology, depending on the practical needs. And this is a strong emphasis here on practical needs. You really need to make sure your system is fit for purpose and accepted. You have to define your practical needs. You have to understand what you really want to get out of this and how it's going to connect to your administrative workflows or your planning workflows. Select the best technical approach, and then don't forget about change management, because this is a big part, which is sometimes the reason why these projects fail or make it. If you manage the change, then you're more likely to succeed. And of course, system maintenance, support, and future development is always relevant. So thank you very much. This was an intro to DSSs, and Mercurio will take it from here and show some more in-depth example.
Thank you very much, Jan. It was a very, very good introduction to decision support systems and how they can benefit integrated water resources management. While the third and last presenter is getting ready, this is Nicola Balbarini. He's a water resources specialist, also the International Development Department at DHI. While he's sharing his screen and getting ready, I just want to mention for all participants, please do post your questions if you have any in the QA session. You can already do that. Then we're of course very happy to take them up during the discussion at the end of this last presentation. And now over to Moya for a more in-depth presentation on an operational decision support system in Tanzania. Thank you.
Okay, good good day, ladies and gentlemen. So I will present to you more details, but I'm happy that Jan has given more than an introduction. I think with his presentation, I don't need to explain details, but rather just show you how those things, or a subset of those things he presented, have been realized in a specific project in Tanzania that we're working on now. We started about 2 years ago, and we have another 9 months to go to conclude that project. It's an operational decision support system, and the suffix of it is through enhanced hydrometeorological services. So currently, project is being implemented in Tanzania. As I mentioned, Tanzania is a country in East Africa. Here on the east side, you see the Indian Ocean, part of the Indian Ocean. You may have heard of Zanzibar. Dar es Salaam is here In the north is Kenya. Here is Lake Victoria, the source of the Nile, one of the sources of the Nile. And then you have other lakes here. And Tanzania has about 9 river basins. They are organized, the country is organized by basin water boards under the Ministry of Water to manage those river basins. And currently in this project, we are focusing on the Pangani River Basin. Here you may know, here in the north of it is the Kilimanjaro mountain. And then we have Wamiruvu, which is one of the bigger water river basins with a lot of water, and then a big one, Rufiji. So currently, in an incremental approach, we are focusing on the 3 basins. So the project objective is to design, develop, install, and implement a DSS. It has to be modular and customizable. This is nowadays standard. So the ODSS is to enhance knowledge and data exchange, as similar to what Jan has introduced to us, support decision making, and encourage integrated water resources management and development in Tanzania. The ODSS has 4 components, and it's interesting that you'll see now the symmetry to what Jan has introduced. It has a water resources information system. This is a system that allows you monitoring. As Jan has said, monitoring is one of the water management activities. Then it has 3 further tools, which are called prediction tools for flood forecasting and early warning, water use permitting analysis for water allocation, and for dam operation support. So out of those many water management activities that were presented in the previous presentation, this one is covering 4 of them. That is the emphasis in this project. We are, as DHI, we have built the system on our established DSS technology with Mike by DHI software and DHI's web water tools portal. Nowadays, decision support systems are unthinkable without a web interface, and there must be a web application. So that is now state of the art. And so we have, just to give you a brief overview of the architecture, it has a 3-layer architecture where we have in the back end, of course, the engines to manage the huge amount of data. Then we have a business layer where we have different functionalities embedded, like time series analysis, reporting, GIS and mapping, scenario analysis, and model embedding. And then, of course, for advanced users or operators, scripting of jobs. And in the analysis and visualization portal at the front end, we have a water resource information system, like I just mentioned, for all 3 basins, real-time flood forecasting and early warning, water use permit and allocation support for 3 basins, and then reservoir operation support for 2 basins, 3 reservoirs in these 2 basins. So the key components of this architecture are: we have a web-based water tools portal, we have integrated applications, and in the back end, we have modeling tools and what is well known, so the Mike Workbench, which basically allows integrating models and the business layers that are necessary to implement the decision support system. As I mentioned, we have an easy-to-use web-based portal. So let me now go to the RIS, the Water Resources Information System. I'll give just a brief introduction, some screenshots, and explain to you how users are supported in their decision-making process. The purpose of the RIS is to enhance knowledge by sharing water datasets and knowledge products, and provide easy access to the latest relevant available datasets for water resources management and planning across Tanzania. This web-based analysis and visualization platform that serves this purpose has 4 key functionalities and purposes. It allows analyzing and downloading spatial and temporal data in maps, charts, and tables. It allows browsing and downloading near real-time Earth observation data sets again in maps and charts. It allows you to view and download knowledge products, which can be reports, presentations, and manuals, like a like in a content management system. And we have what we call an electronic atlas, which has the relevant maps which water resources engineers or water resources specialists need to regularly look into with the latest data to understand what's happening in their basin, respective basins. The key features of the RIS are it is linked to diverse data sources. I think Jan has mentioned something similar, that it automatically shows the latest data from external and internal sources. It can be from public domain, from affiliated institutions, and from own data repositories. Public domain, it could be a magnitude of more than 100 different data products that are publicly available. Affiliated institutions can be, in our case, is, for example, the Tanzania Meteorological Authority. And then from own data repositories can be external systems that capture data from stations and have them stored in telemetry service. The data sets like precipitation, temperature, evaporation, whatever is necessary for water resources analyses are historical, of course, but also near real time and also forecasted data sets, which are again could be public or local. A similar picture had been shown by Jan, basically, but this is now for Tanzania. So you have a map-based interface where you can pan, zoom, and whatever you do, you're used to doing in GIS environments. And then by clicking on certain objects, you can visualize the time series for long periods as you wish. You can analyze them, you can look at them, you can compare them, and then even the analysis can comprise, for example, making, let's say, resampling of time series, or in this example, generating duration curves to understand the hydrological regime in this specific example. So these are embedded tools so there are a big number of them that allow you on the fly to understand what is happening in the basin. And of course, if you need more comprehensive analysis tools, you can use, as I had shown previously, the backend functionalities, which is comprehensive. Another example here to show gridded information, like in this case, rainfall, which also can be animated, as you can see here in this bar, and then you can, so to say, run it as a film to see how over time the rainfall distribution is changing in space. Then we have the flood forecasting and early warning system. This flood forecasting and early warning system has basically two purposes. It predicts, because it's a forecast system, and it alerts, meaning if certain thresholds are exceeded, the right people must be informed with the right information of what is expected to happen. And these two core functionalities make, in our case, what we call the fuse. It has several components, and as also Jan has mentioned, it can have an embedded weather forecasting system. And in our case, a weather forecasting system is a numerical weather prediction model, 3 of them, 2 for short and midterm and 1 for long term, from the Tanzania Meteorological Authority. It is a downscaled forecast model from global forecast models, so it is quality controlled by the Meteorological Authority. And then once you know, so have the forecasted rainfall, you use hydrologic forecasting system by using a rainfall runoff model, in our case, DHI's NAM, a flood forecasting system with hydrodynamic modeling and data assimilation based on Mike+, and then a dissemination system to automatically alert stakeholders through different communication channels like email, SMS, WhatsApp. These are basically, then they will be tailored to the specific needs of the stakeholders. Just to show you a look and feel of the UI, in a map, you can immediately see the dots where currently in the forecast, we expect to have a critical situation. These are the red dots here. And by clicking on some objects, you can then see, in our case here, how the rainfall would evolve. In our case here, this catchment that has become dark upon the click. And then, of course, what matters also is the catchment runoff. And in this case, you can see how it evolves over time, the catchment runoff. Similarly, in an urban area, this is now Dar es Salaam, the river called Msimbazi, and at the Morogoro Bridge, which is very flood prone. There you can see how the flow is, the water level is expected to evolve over time. And then in the same charts, I go back to the other chart, you can see the different thresholds, the warning levels. Yellow meaning it is an alert level, and red is a warning level. And then you can zoom in and really explore what the system is telling you with all the uncertainty you have in a forecast, but however, you have at least a graphic representation of what to expect by when. You can similarly go into a river system in the UI, in the web-based UI, and generate a longitudinal profile and animate it and see how a flood wave would propagate in the river system. In this case, I just present you here a snapshot. And as you can see, I think in this forecast, we do not expect some critical thresholds to be reached. Automatically with this, dissemination system is triggered, and so that registered stakeholders can receive flood forecast alerts through different communication channels, as I just mentioned. Here in this example, you see by email, where the managers or decision makers at high level are informed regularly by what's going on. And similarly, you can also have just a subset of that to selected stakeholders. Then we have the water use permitting analysis tool for water allocation, which we call WUPA. And it supports different activities, basically granting new water use permits. It includes the water balance in allocation. You must know how much water is there, how much water is demanded, and what is the balance, and can I allocate the water, basically, which is, of course, supported in the back end with the modeling tool. In our case, it is Mike Hydro Basin. It allows you to analyze the effects in the front end and then to make decisions. Because the application and configuration of water balance modeling tools is complex, we have made a simplified user interface to allow the decision makers to allocate or to decide on whether to grant a permit for an application. The UI looks like this, where you can see the current pending applications on the left. The user has selected one, and then you can click in the map and see, okay, what is, for example, a given permit, how many cubic meters per day are currently permitted for that specific user. And in the symbology, you can even see whether critical water deficits are reached. In this map, after you've made an analysis, you've run a model in the backend, you can then see how the situation in the basin is. This is around Arusha, not far from Kilimanjaro, where you can see how the monthly distribution of the water balance is. And then on the left side, you can then you can give a recommendation either to grant a permit or not to grant it, or that it is undecided. And if you're undecided, you can play with different numbers and ask yourself, what if I granted less, what would happen in the basin? So you have a scenario analysis functionality behind this. The last functionality I would like to present is the dam operation support. The dam operation support that we have has the purpose of, on the basis of seasonal forecasts. This is something that also Jan had mentioned before. And with embedded operation rules of reservoirs, you forecast what would happen or what is to happen with the forecasted flows and with the existing rules. And then you can decide how to operate the reservoirs. So to say, ask yourself, what would happen if I operate the dam differently, given the seasonal forecast that I have here at hand? In a map, it looks like this. We have here in the upstream, we have the Mtera Dam, and we have here another dam downstream, and then we have here some control sections where, let's say in our case here, it may be an irrigation site or a specific water user that may be impacted by operations upstream. And in the legend, you see the system tells you when you investigate something, whether the input has been changed or the output has been changed, and input changing you do, for example, graphically here. What I have an example that I'm doing here is that you have an upstream reservoir here, and you ask yourself, what would happen if I change the target power? It may be very theoretical, but for demonstration purposes, it's very interesting. So you change from the blue curve of the target power over time, you change it, you lower it, and then you ask yourself what would happen downstream. And then you see in a map what would happen at a glimpse by the symbology in the map. And then when you click on an object, you can see how the, for example, flow over time would change at a specific location of interest. Similarly, we have established dashboards where you can then investigate different what-if scenarios that you have tried out by changing, for example, in our case, the target power. But it could be another release rule of the reservoir as defined by the modeler. And then you can compare how the different scenarios that you're investigating in seasonal forecast mode would affect different state variables downstream or anywhere in the system. It could be a water level, it could be the energy production at the same site, and it could be also water level at another site. And here it's very interesting to see that if you don't do anything, you should expect that suddenly the energy production would go down and maybe below a certain threshold. But if you adjust the target power, maybe the energy produced would rather be smooth over time. So these kind of investigations you can do and then recommend to the institution that is in charge of that what they can do within their mandate to change reservoir release rules. So before I conclude, just a few remarks again, reminding us what I have shown. The ODSS in Tanzania that we've implemented has the purpose to enhance knowledge and data exchange. It supports decision-making, and it supports integrated water resource management. It has 4 system components that support 4 types of water management activities, which is monitoring with the RIS, water resource information system, flood forecasting and early warning, water use permitting analyses, and dam operation support. Before I conclude, I'd like to show you one chart which I have from literature from on computer-aided DSS by Laux and Van Beek. You have various phases of decision support systems. You may, which is not anymore current, you may have something that decision makers just do completely unsupported, up to the fully automated where everything is done by a model. For example, if you have automated changing of releases in a system, and in between you have transitions, you have information support, systematic analysis, systems analysis with alternatives, system with override, where the model plays a different role. In the first one, data is analyzed by the model. In the second one, options are generated with the model. And then decision selection can also be done with models, with some optimization algorithms. But here, this and the remainder, the residual, is then the decisions are implemented in our case, for example, here by the decision maker. So in this sphere, where is the ODSS? I think we are somewhere between number 4 and number 5, where data is provided by the GIS and database. This is currently state-of-the-art. Data is analyzed by the model, which is also state-of-the-art. Options are generated by the model. Yes, the decision support system must do that nowadays. And decision selection is provided by the system, but at the end of the day, the decision is implemented by the decision maker. With this, I give back to Nicola, and I hope that I have given you a fair overview of what we're currently doing in Tanzania. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moy. I think you've given a very a great overview of what Operation Decision Support System that is being implemented in Tanzania. I will now start the Q&A session, and even though many of you have already started posting their question, I'll ask you to keep doing so. And so we have about 20-25 minutes for all the panelists to be able to answer these questions. Before we start with the first question, I just want to share with you, just want to let you know that all the slides that we have been presenting are already available. You can, through this link, you can find this link by taking a picture with your phone or whatever you have of your camera to the QR code that you have here. And this way you will be able to access the link where the data are, where the slides are. Heard so much about data, so I got a bit lost where the slides are. And then at the same time, we will also be posting the link in the chat. So you'll also be able to find the link there if that's what suits you best. But I'll keep this slide in the background during the Q&A, so all of you have the time to access the slides. And the first question I would like to pose is for Jan. And there are many organizations that already have systems and workflows in place in order to deal with water resources management. And so my question is, the kind of decision support system you've been presenting, which, as you also mentioned, links up to certain changes in the way things are done, how can it tap in what is already there, or to which degree do you need to change the workflow that are already in place at the country level?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, I think every implementation of a system like the ones we have been describing is individual. So it's done case by case. And usually one of the first steps is analysis of what is existing in place, right? We don't want to duplicate things which are already adopted and work. It's a rare case that actually, there's a lot of systems which are state of the art, but it's very frequent that there are heritage systems which sometimes qualify to being upgraded. Of course, there are some technological barriers in the sense how much you can connect systems between each other. But I mean, the heritage systems sometimes, developed by third parties, sometimes could be already outdated in terms of technology. Then it's a challenge. But if there are some general types of systems like SCADA systems, they can usually be connected pretty easy to the new decision support systems, and we have different tools to make those connections within the mic operations system. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Ian. There are a few questions.
Korea, if you want to add something,
yes, please do so. I don't know if you have anything to add, Mikuya, or if I...
On this aspect, no.
Okay, that sounds good. But you can stay unmuted because there have been a few questions coming in from a colleague called Joseph Swai from Natafiti Foundation, and apologies for the bad pronunciation in Tanzania. So I believe those questions are for you, Mukha. And he's asking, he's working at this foundation, he's asking if NGOs can access this data for making informed decision in the activities that the NGO is doing. And he's also asking if the DSS is just for government, or, is it open for other organizations, and can other organizations access data?
Okay, there is a technical and a formal aspect in this. I think technically, the answer is yes, you can access it. I think, but it requires, of course, now the formal aspect. The formal aspect is yes, the owner of the system is the government of Tanzania, represented by the Ministry of Water. However, the Ministry of Tanzania has a big interest that the key stakeholders of its stakeholders have access to the system, at least to look at it and to get informed. Let us see, for example, the risk system. if it is read-only anyways. So it is about the Ministry of Water granting access to users so that they can read it. So if Joseph, in this case, contacts the Ministry of Water, then if they grant him the access, then it is accessible to him for reading, downloading, and visualizing this monitoring component of the system. Similarly, the situation with the flood forecasts. If, for example, institutions like the Red Cross need special forecast for specific areas in case of floods, and they want to be alerted, institution like the Red Cross can then apply to be informed for certain locations if there are severe floods forecasted. That process is technically already implemented. It's all about, again, getting the right grant from the ministry and the operators giving the grant to this institution. When it comes to the WUPA, the Water Use Permit Analysis Tool, that is an encapsulated activity only for the ministry or the basin water boards. I think none of the parties would be interested to have that open, that decision-making process open to other entities than the Ministry of Water. Dam operations support, we are currently discussing with the Ministry of Water to give that grant to TANESCO because it's also a what-if generation game. It's not about really acting and changing things, but it's really to understand what would happen if I changed the rules. And TANESCO, which is the energy supplier of Tanzania, if it plays with this tool, it can think about or rethink about the current reservoir release rules, and then when the policies can change policies, how reservoirs are to be operated based on the experience they gain with the DSS. So in short, the answer is yes, but contact the Ministry of Water.
Thank you, Muhia, for this for the answer. I mean, we understand it's a complex system, and there are different levels at which it is accessible or not accessible. But this was a great overview of that, and I hope it also addresses Joseph's question on how to be able to benefit from the work that has been done in Tanzania. Now, a question from Ian that comes from Kirill Maneski from Aarhus University, and apologize again for the pronunciation. I'm sure I said it's not great, but he's asking if you also work with increasing the capacity of national authorities in the Global South to uptake the decision support system to their integrated water resources management. And more specifically, when talking about data, are there any open access, any open access or freely available data that are used in the decision support system?
This is partially addressed to me, and she also has asked something about the WUPA. I can see. It says, do government water bodies use the presented water allocation tool WUPA? In Europe, water accounting and permitting is quite complex, often not transparent and region dependent.
Yeah, we can also take that, answer that question first, Muhia, if you would like to address the one on the water permits.
Yes. I think in general, water permits, they can be, it's all about time and space, how much water is available where and how much water is applied for where and for when. The challenge we see in Tanzania is data quality, like in many projects worldwide, is the information that we have that entity X or entity Y is has a permit to abstract water. Is it correct? And secondly, we have what they call illegal water abstractors, because the monitoring of water abstraction is not appropriate or not meticulous. So what's really happening on the ground and what is being permitted and what is being applied for may not match. This is a general challenge. It's not in the complexity of how water is allocated. It's rather a monitoring issue and a data quality issue. And hence, it's not transparent. So it's, I think, not only in Europe, but the complexity, as I mentioned, has to do with monitoring and data quality.
Thank you. I don't know
Yes.
if Jan has anything to add here. You see he has raised that.
Yeah, I just want to, because, you know, the question had a couple of layers, and one of them was, do we work with to increase capacity of the national authorities in the global south? Now, I had to quickly check what global south means, but based on what I found, it seems like, you know, like Malaysia, Tanzania, Myanmar, all those countries which we were showing examples from are actually from that part of the world. And it's actually funny because a lot of these projects are funded by donor institutions. And in some cases, we are implementing the state-of-the-art technology in countries which are, I would say, less developed and data poor, whereas the more developed and data-rich and money-rich also countries often based on older heritage systems and are kind of slow to move on. But that's just an observation. It's not a general rule, but sometimes it's surprising that these very advanced systems are built in countries which I would say are developing, and then the developed countries they sometimes are not so far advanced in these areas.
Thank you, Jan, for the.
And then there was also a question about open access or freely available data. I'm not the expert here, but I understand that, you know, all the satellite data we collect in those systems is usually open access, right? I mean, we can also buy more precise data when it's needed.
Absolutely, and maybe I can chip in here on the open access or freely available data. I would definitely say they are always included as kind of like a way of integrating, supporting data that are collected at the national level. So they're always present, and they're always used also just as a way to to really take advantage as much as possible of satellite-based data or other kind of like globally available data set. And I don't know if Muhir, you want to add something here, or if
Yes, I would like to add on the capacity building. What Jan has said is right. We are implementing complex systems and state-of-the-art systems in the countries, and we're giving trainings in different types. It could be an e-learning platform. It could be training like in a classroom. There is on-the-job training. So these aspects are given. Are emphasized and they're focused on in the projects. In Tanzania, that's the case, and in other projects I've worked on. However, there is always an institutional challenge, and this is not limited to the Global South. I think it's general. How do you make sure that that knowledge and skill is preserved? People change within institutions, their roles change, and how is that knowledge transferred from one group that has been trained by us to another group that will replace this group that we have trained? This is a sustainability issue, and it is very challenging to any institution. And I think that especially in countries of the Global South, where resources are scarce, meaning resources of the institutions, this is a big challenge, so that knowledge is not preserved. But to underline, capacity enhancement and capacity building is a high priority in these projects. Regarding data, there again, something which may sound negative. The countries have their own data. Let's say, for example, the Tanzania Meteorological Authority, or in other countries as well. And the data sharing even within the countries is also challenged by bureaucratic hurdles, that one government institution wants to sell its data to another government institution, and collaborations have to be formalized in memoranda of understanding, which take time. So these are obstacles that these countries in the Global South are facing. But I think also from my experience back in Europe, these kind of hurdles are also interinstitutional hurdles when it comes to data are there. But we observe that global data is becoming easily available. 130 plus Earth observation products are out there just to be tapped into analyzed. So this helps a lot to overcome those obstacles, at least at the macro level or even at the meso level. But when it comes to the micro level, of course, local data, national data matter. Thank you.
If I could just add that the DSS as such is also a tool which could be used to preserve, the knowledge and ensure continuity as people come and go. And another thing is we have had some examples of DSSs which were actually specifically built for training for hydropower operators. And that's a little bit like a flight simulator where you have the river model attached to it, but you also have to react properly to with all your controls, and those are used for operator training when people come and go.
Thank you, and thank you, Muhuya. And I mean, I hear there are two topics here that you are kind of like mentioning again and again around capacity development, capacity building, and as well as the need of kind of like working across organizations for data sharing and for management of water resources, which are also some of the principles that stands behind integrated water resources management. We have a few minutes left, so I think we can take maybe the last few questions. And I can see there is, so in the questions that have not been addressed yet, there is a topic that comes up a few times, which is around looking at the problem of water resources at different scales. And I'll first ask maybe Ian to address this point here. There is a question around many of the example of decision support system you have presented are at the national, at the large scale, country scale. Is there any perspectives on the lower scale where integrated water resources management HI systems like the one you present is worth the investment?
Yeah, a great question. I think one of the features of this technology is that it's scalable in general. So it can be deployed on national scale. It can be deployed on catchment scale also. And also our models, something which I showed on one of the slides, there are different type of models. So depending on how deep you want to go into the modeling and how deep, how rich data you have, you can also scale the models to be more or less precise. So you can actually go down pretty deep on local scale. Having said that, it's also worth observing that, for some reasons, most of these systems have been kind of developed by DHI on national scale because they followed the donor financing, like the World Bank and other institutions, which usually kind of finance big projects, not small projects. But that's not the rule. We can and we have some examples like this flood forecasting example from Poland is on a catchment of 1,000 square kilometers. So that's pretty small and has a dedicated weather radar, which was built there for exactly the purpose of predicting flash floods in that small catchment where big problems have been experienced in the past.
Thank you, Ian. So it's very clear that this kind of system can be used at different scale. And I think you used also before the example of specific hydropower stations. So I guess also in that case, there is more kind of like a dedicated effort at the local area in using such a system. I think we have time.
One more thing, that this Malaysian system, which I've been showing, it's a national system, but it's actually implemented catchment by catchment. So it doesn't cover the whole country yet. It covers around 10 catchments, and then it's being built in phases. So that's it has the local perspective built in. Thank you. And yes, over to you, Muhuya. While you're also addressing this question, I would also like to ask if you could add as well, from your experience, if there are any places where informations are available about water resources management in small communities. I expect this might be something you have experience with.
Okay. Jan focused on scaling down. There is even one level up beyond national, which is the transboundary. Our experiences in the Mekong and in the Nile show that one has even to scale up, because things that you do at a local level, then at the national level, will affect water uses and water resources beyond the national boundaries. So even there, you have to think even maybe bigger. That's just an addition. So it's in all directions, bigger and smaller. Water resources at information at, is it community level? Was that the right word?
Yes,
I admit, yeah, at local, in those projects, international projects, what we call the Global South, in my personal experience, the answer is no. But even in projects that I have worked on in Europe many years ago, water-related information is at higher level. It could be a river basin organization, or it could be at a federal state organization, federal state level. But when it comes to things that can be crowdsourced, there are certain experiments to do that you crowdsource information by going to the field and capturing information. But I admit at that level, my experience is very low.
Thank you very much, Huya, and thank you everyone also for posting the questions. There's been quite a lot coming in, and I'm afraid we don't have more time to cover all of them, but thank you very much for engaging in this question and answer session. I'll now give the words to Arvid for the closing remarks and for any final comments on today's session.
Thank you, Nicola. Well, dear friends and colleagues, this was all we have for you today from the NIDA Fellowship Center and from DSI. Should you face difficulties in scanning the QR code or use the QR code to get access to the slides, then do not hesitate to write an email to DFC, and we will send you the slides. Yeah, and thanks a lot to the DSI and to the presenters, Nicola, Jan, and Mercury, for your fine and excellent presentations. They have surely given us much more insight in the great potentials and applicability of decision support systems in water resource management. Finally, also indeed, thanks to all the participants and for your interest and excellent questions. From DFC, we hope that you all enjoyed the webinar and look forward to see you to the next. Goodbye for now. Nicola, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I can just join you in thanking everyone for taking part today's webinar, for the presenters also take part in today's session. And yes, as Arvid already said, please reach out for any questions, any doubt. If you can't access the slides or for every issues that there might be, please feel free to reach out. And yes, and then here there are some more links to both the NIDA Fellowship Center and DHI Group if you are curious to hear more about what has been presented today. We look forward to having you in the next session in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.